The Misfit of Demon King Academy is a new anime that came out in the summer of 2020. It's quite popular as well. It's based on a Japanese light novel series. I haven't read it myself, so I don't know how good it is. But the anime version is very one-dimensional. The only thing it seems to care about is making the protagonist look cool. It has a lot of bad writing techniques, and I want to talk about one of those. The first episode of The Misfit of Demon King Academy did a lot of things quite poorly. Things like lazily dumping expositions, world building, and character introductions. The thing I want to talk about though is how the show did a half-assed job of establishing and raising conflict in a fight. Specifically, the very first fight between the protagonist and Sepes, I think is his name. Going forward, I will refer to him as the opposing force. And you'll see in a little bit why I would want to do that. The show did not at all do a good job of establishing and raising conflict. So what's conflict, and why is it such a big deal, especially in a fight? I found the perfect definition for conflict on masterclass.com. It says, in a story, conflict is a clash between two opposing forces that creates the narrative thread for a story. I like the definition, but the way I personally describe conflict is a roadblock that must be overcome. The reason I do that is because generally when you hear the word conflict, you think of a disagreement or an argument between two or more people. Usually it's something physical, it's external, and you can see it happen. But in the context of a story, conflict can be both external and internal. An external conflict is a conflict the protagonist has against another person or thing. We call them the opposing force. It's usually the antagonist or the villain. An example of an external conflict can be something as simple as a verbal argument or a fistfight. While internal conflict is a struggle within oneself, it can be a person or a thing. It's usually in someone's mind. It can be any type of internal struggle, so it's a bit more complex. Here are two examples that will hopefully help you get an idea of what internal conflict is. In Toy Story, Buzz Lightyear is a toy who doesn't know that he's a toy. He thinks his backstory is real and he truly believes that he's alive. He struggles internally to realize and accept the fact that he's a toy. In a show called Barry, the protagonist Barry is a really good hitman who wants to become an actor. He wants to quit being a hitman and leaves all the killings and terrible things he's done behind and start a new life as a good person. Barry struggles internally to accept himself and live as a good person, because he can't let go of all the bad things he's done. He condemns himself for his past actions. This is internal conflict. Barry, of course, faces external conflict as well, in the form of people who keep forcing him to be a hitman. The reason conflict is so important is because it's literally the thing that makes the story. Without conflict, there's no story. 99, if not 100% of stories in existence involve some kind of conflict. If you take a look at the plot of any movie at all, it's always something versus something, or it can be someone versus their internal self. That's internal conflict. Those are usually coming of age or rite of passage films. The point is, conflict is necessary, and a good story has both types of conflicts. The fight between the protagonist and the opposing force in The Misfit of Demon King Academy severely lacks good conflict. The external conflict of this fight was hastily put together several scenes before, and there is absolutely no internal conflict to speak of. Now, I'll say this though. I'll acknowledge that the writing staff knows that conflict is necessary for this fight, so they have a scene to establish that conflict, which is the scene where this guy, the opposing force, is basically trying and failing to bully the protagonist. The show wanted this scene to let us, the audience, know that he's the bad guy and we should hate him. It attempted to establish the conflict between him and the protagonist. This way, the conflict rises even more when the fight finally happens. When the protagonist shows off how overpowered he is and finally wrecks his opposing force, there's an emotional payoff for the audience. So they do deserve some recognition and props for that, for attempting to do that at least. Again, it was very hastily put together and it feels forced and artificial. There's no stakes in the scene, meaning there's nothing to lose or gain, or at least it doesn't feel like it. The way it introduces the opposing force is very lazy. He's just kind of there for the sole purpose of being a dick. It seems to me like he wakes up one morning and goes, oh gee, it's time to go stand in front of that one gate and be a dick to that one guy in particular. And even worse than that, there's literally an invisible character off screen yelling out exposition about this guy. What's up with that? We're learning this information through exposition dump, not through the story. This was not earned. It's like the writing team is saying, here, you need to know this piece of information, so here's a random line about it. That's just lazy writing. And the conflict, or you could call the beef between these two characters, is one-sided. Partly because the setup is BS to begin with, but mainly because one of the parties involved doesn't care about it at all. I mean, for God's sake, even the protagonist himself is not invested in his conflict, so why should we? The show is being portrayed through the perspective of the protagonist. When the protagonist doesn't care about this part of the story, chances are the audience won't either. It's a sad excuse for a conflict. When the fight finally happens, we don't care or feel as connected as we should to this conflict. All we see is the protagonist exerting his overwhelming power and crushing his opponent, which is satisfying and it does look cool. I mean, the guy attacks him with his heartbeat. Are you kidding me? That's sick. But that's all it is. That's all it can be. There's no substance. It's just a cool looking scene that shows off an overpowered character. It's one-dimensional. Imagine if we were invested in this conflict and there's actual stake where there's something to lose or gain, because as of now, we know that the protagonist is never gonna lose. This fight could have had a much more significant emotional payoff. So even though the show looks cool, there's a reason it's not on the same level as other shows with overpowered main characters that aren't one-dimensional like this one. It doesn't quite have the same level of ratings and probably won't ever be as good. There's more bad things to say about the misfit of Demon King Academy, but I won't because there's some good things to say about it too. Now, I want to be clear, just because I don't like the writing and it's not my favorite show this season, doesn't automatically mean it's bad. This type of show keeps getting made and keeps being watched for a reason. If it is your cup of tea, that's great, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a huge fan of anime in general. I want all anime to succeed. Compared to the Western media, especially Hollywood films, I think anime is much more versatile and just fun. So the more success and relevance anime gets in general, the happier I am. My name is Nick, and this is my podcast where I talk about notable storytelling techniques in movies, TV shows, but mostly animes. And I want to ask for your help. I love stories and storytelling. It's my favorite thing in the world. I love making this podcast, and I want this channel to grow. I want to do this as a job. It's a dream that I have. I'm a broke college student, and I'm trying to find my own path in this world. If you like my content, if you want to support me, if you believe in my dream, please tell your friends about my podcast. You can post a screenshot or a link or anything on Twitter or Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, any social media platform you might use. It will really help me grow. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you have a great day.